A brand new Z28 rolls off the lot. Same stripes on the hood, same badge on the fender, same reputation built on Psyche Trans Am dominance just a few years earlier. If you'd walked past it at a dealership in 1972, you would have recognized it instantly. But under the hood, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not with a press release, not with an apology, just enough. Compression was lower, the camshaft was milder, ignition timing was more conservative, the intake and emissions equipment were different, and the number printed in the brochure now read 255 horsepower. That figure looked catastrophic compared to the 360 horsepower rating of the 1970 LT1, but between 1971 and 1972, Chevrolet also switched from say gross to say net horsepower ratings, measuring engines with full accessories, factory exhaust, and production air cleaner. The drop looked worse on paper than it was in practice. Still, owners felt it, and many of them made a decision they weren't going to leave it that way. This is the story of what GM did to the Z28, why they did it, and why the people who bought these cars quietly started undoing the changes, what the Z28 was meant to be. To understand 1972, you have to remember what the Z28 originally represented. The Z28 wasn't created as a marketing exercise. It was a homologation car. In 1967, Chevrolet needed a production engine under 305 cubic inches to qualify for Psyche Trans Am racing. The solution was the now legendary 302 cubic inch small block, essentially a 327 block, paired with a 283 crankshaft, high compression, solid lifters, aggressive cam timing, a large Holley carburetor, power that lived high in the RPM range. It wasn't built for effortless torque. It was built to rev to 7,000 RPM and beyond if you were brave enough. The 302 demanded attention. It rewarded drivers who understood gearing, shift points, and how to stay inside the power band. By 1969, the Z28 had earned credibility. On the track, it was winning. On the street, it could embarrass larger displacement competitors if the driver knew what he was doing. Then came 1970. The 302 was retired, replaced by the LT1 350. And make no mistake, the 1970 LT1 was legitimate. Solid lifter camshaft, 11.01 compression, free-flowing heads, a Holley 4-barrel, rated at 360 horsepower, say gross. Even accounting for the generous gross measurement method, it was a strong high-compression small block. But by 1971, the direction had changed. So here's a question worth asking. When did you first notice the shift, reading the window sticker, or from behind the wheel? The engineering changes, step by step. The detuning of the Z28 didn't happen in one dramatic sweep. It happened incrementally. 1971, compression falls. In 1971, GM dropped compression ratios across its performance lineup. The LT1 fell from 11.01 to 9.01. That wasn't cosmetic. That was physics. Lower compression means lower peak cylinder pressure. Lower cylinder pressure means less force on the piston. Less force means less torque and less power. You can advance timing, you can alter cam events, but once compression drops that far, the character of the engine changes. The reason was clear: lower octane fuel and tightening emissions requirements. Engines had to survive on what was coming. 1972, the measurement changes. In 1972, two additional developments reshaped the narrative. First, the industry transitioned from say gross horsepower to say net horsepower. Gross numbers were measured on an engine dyno without accessories, often with optimized tuning and open exhaust. Net horsepower measured the engine as installed in the car: alternator, power steering pump, stock exhaust, full intake system. A motor previously rated at 330 gross might suddenly be rated at 250 net. So when the LT1 appeared at 255 horsepower in 1972, the number looked like a collapse. Some of that was measurement methodology, but not all of it. Second, Chevrolet replaced the solid lifter cam with a hydraulic camshaft. Hydraulic lifters were quieter, required less maintenance, and appealed to a broader buyer base, but they softened the top end and reduced the high RPM urgency that defined earlier Z28s. Add emissions equipment like eager valves, conservative spark curves to prevent detonation on lower octane fuel, and revised intake tuning, and you had an engine that carried the LT1 badge but behaved differently. Here's the debate. Was the gross to net rating switch honest transparency, or the biggest shock to performance perception in automotive history? Reasonable people land on both sides. Street performance. The real difference. The 1972 Z28 wasn't slow. Period. Road tests recorded quarter-mile times between 14.5 and 15.0 seconds. That's not embarrassing, especially considering factory tuning, emissions calibration, and stock street tires. But compared to the high 13-second capability of a well-driven 1970 LT1, it was a clear step backward. More important than the numbers was the feel. The early LT1 rewarded you for running it hard. The solid lifter cam encouraged precision shifts. The engine came alive in the upper RPM band. The 1972 version felt smoother, broader torque curve, easier idle, less mechanical drama. It was more forgiving for everyday driving, and less thrilling when pushed. Insurance dynamics shifted too. Lower published horsepower ratings meant some insurers reclassified the Z28 into less severe risk categories. For younger buyers, that mattered. Let's ask it directly. Would you trade a little top-end aggression for affordable insurance and easier ownership? For some buyers in 1972, that was a practical decision. The aftermarket response. What happened next is the part that doesn't show up in corporate history. Owners started reversing the changes. High compression piston sets were available. Solid lifter cam kits could be purchased from performance suppliers. Carburetors were rejetted. Distributors were recurved. Ignition timing was advanced carefully. For a few $100s in early 70s money, much of the lost performance could be reclaimed. And that's what makes this era fascinating. Buyers weren't angry at Chevrolet. Most understood the regulatory landscape. They understood emissions, fuel changes, and insurance pressure. They simply refused to treat the factory tune as final. So here's another question. If you bought a 72 or 73 Z28, what was the first thing you changed? Camshaft? Compression? Ignition curve? Because in many cases, the showroom floor was just the starting point, the broader turning point. By 1974, the second-generation Z28 was nearing cancellation. Then the October 1973 fuel crisis hit. Gas lines, rationing, federal 55 mph speed limits. The entire premise of high-performance streetcars required public justification. The Z28 was canceled after the 1974 model year. It wouldn't return until 1977, and when it did, it came back with 185 horsepower and a very different personality. What ended the original Z28 wasn't one regulation, it was convergence. Compression limits tied to unleaded fuel requirements, emissions hardware that reduced efficiency, insurance structures that penalized performance, and finally, fuel economics that reshaped consumer priorities. The engineers at Chevrolet didn't forget how to build high-revving small blocks. They were constrained by policy and market reality, and buyers adapted. Legacy. Reconsidering the early 70s Z28. The early 70s Z28 occupies an unusual space in collector culture. Production numbers weren't low, roughly 2,500 units in 1972. Over 11,000 in 1973, nearly 14,000 in 1974, as buyers rushed to secure one before cancellation. Market values today reflect that, typically below the six-figure territory commanded by 1969 and 1970 cars. But value isn't the same as significance. The second-generation Camaro platform was strong. Independent front suspension, solid handling dynamics, a balanced chassis that responded well to tuning. The limitation wasn't the car itself, it was the regulatory environment surrounding the engine, and the fact that the performance could be largely restored with period-correct modifications strengthens the argument for these cars. Here's the final debate. Does the early 70s Z28 deserve more respect than it gets, not as a factory spec sheet hero, but as a platform owners improve themselves? Because the story of the 1972 Z28 isn't just about detuning. It's about mechanical conviction. The people who bought these cars in 1972 understood what had been taken away. They understood compression ratios. They understood camshaft profiles. They understood ignition timing curves. And instead of walking away, they went to the parts counter. That belief that if you understand what was changed, you can change it back might be the most authentic part of muscle car culture. The horsepower numbers dropped, the regulations tightened, the fuel changed, but the instinct to tune, to modify, to recover what was lost, that didn't disappear. And in many ways, that response defined the era just as much as the cars themselves.